Take a pit stop for all things NASCAR with the Four Tire Change podcast. Here is your host, Dawson Iserloh.
Four Tire Change podcast, ESPN Southwest Louisiana. Interesting first race of the round of 12 in the NASCAR Cup Series. And we're here to break it down for you. Appreciate you like, comment, subscribe if you're enjoying the content. So, the thing with going to this second round here, we had a first round that as far as like who was eliminated, right, wasn't any real big surprises. Maybe you could argue Alex Bowman, but for the most part, like we kind of got what we were expecting. So going into the second round, it was going to be interesting to see who kind of separated themselves. I think there's still kind of some clear favorites here, right, at the guys at the top. But you kind of wondered who was going to have a struggle here in the second round. Dominant performance from Penske Racing, first off, in New Hampshire. And that's kind of the story of this race, is that Penske kind of reminds people, hey, when the playoffs come around, we show up. Like, whether you like us or not, we're going to be there. And so when you see what Blaney and Logano did, dominating the course of that race, Logano in the first half, Blaney in the second half, and Blaney ultimately gets the win to, of course, move himself into the round of 8. It is a nice reminder of like who Penske is, and we know they've won the last championships for a reason. Like, they have been there at the end multiple different times. So I think their showing of speed, it's not all that surprising. Now, they've had a little bit of a rut at different points this season, but they're back and they're going to be a force to be reckoned with. And I think everybody in the field knows that at Phoenix it's kind of those guys to beat, and that's going to be tough to deal with, right? Past that, the struggles of 2311 were probably the most stunning to me. Below the cut line by a large margin, I believe it's 23 and 27 points below the cut line now, are both Tyler Reddick and Bubba Wallace. It was a full-blown disaster day for them. They didn't have the speed. They got into some issues, right? And they end up having really, really bad finishes. And I thought I picked both these guys to keep rolling. Like, I thought Bubba was had so much positive momentum. I thought Reddick was kind of figuring out at the right time. And now they have the biggest hills to climb. And, outside of finishing and really, now I will say this, they're going to Kansas, a place that they've, had a ton of success. 2311's had a lot of speed at Kansas in the past. But you're up against it now. And I didn't see that coming. The cut line too, it's funny, like some years and in some instances the cut line gets blurred, right? You got a bunch of drivers in the mix, so maybe it's a handful of points here and there. You kind of got a clear delineation after one race. It's just a 12-point deficit from the bottom of the cut line from 9th to 8th. And that's, of course, where Ross Chastain sits right there below the cut line. 12 points, though, is a lot to come back from, as we've been bringing up. Now, again, if somebody has a bad finish who's above the cut line, if somebody DNFs or something, that's going to change everything all over again. But it's, Chastain, Cindric, and then those two at the bottom, the 2311 cars, they got a lot of work to do. And it makes it a little bit, probably easier to breathe for a guy like Chase Elliott and some of those drivers who've been kind of battling on the right side of the cut line, but still have some work to be done here in the next couple of rounds. At the top, if you're Denny Hamlin, if you're, of course, the Penske cars now after what Logano just did and Blaney with the win, you're feeling okay about yourself. Christopher Bell, even Kyle Larson, you don't really have to worry all that much. But that next group of drivers, like, it's going to be a stressful couple of races. And we've talked about it before. It's interesting, right? SVG's not in it now, so that kind of helps you out as far as feeling the stress of having him around. But you don't want to go to the Roval needing points, man. It's just a little bit of an unpredictable track. It's tough to go into a race like the Roval and really try and execute a game plan, right? I think you can go into Kansas with that mindset. Go, hey, we know we're going to have speed, like especially if you're one of those teams like 2311. You go, hey, we're going to have speed early. Let's get out front. Let's qualify well. Let's get some stage points and, try and maximize our finish. And then we'll look up at the end and see where we're at, and we'll make a plan for the Roval, and we'll try and do our best when we get there. If you struggle at Kansas and you put yourself with your back against the wall, here's the other thing, right? In most years, and I think in most rounds of the playoffs, now it's not a great strategy to say, hey, we got to go win the last race of the round. But at the end of the day, you sit there and go, all right, whatever happens here at Kansas. And, if you're way below the cut line, you go, all right, we're going to make a plan to just go all in and try to win the race at the Roval. When SVG's in the field, winning the race at the Roval seems like an even higher mountain to climb. Like, it just doesn't seem feasible for a lot of these drivers. So if you don't put yourself in a good situation points-wise, if you're Bubba, if you're Reddick, if you're Cindric, Chastain, even remember, the guys like Chase Elliott who are kind of like going to be walking that line trying to stay in the fight here, you don't feel great about your chances of going out and bringing a race-winning car to the Roval when SVG's in the field. Now, the Roval's a little different, right? It hasn't been as dominant, and you bring the elements of the oval, and maybe you can get somebody in there that can mess with him. I don't know if the 88's a surefire pick to win the race, but it does make it a little bit more layered and difficult to try and plan points-wise if that's what ends up happening. Let's talk about Kansas. As I said, I think the 2311 cars have had a good history here. You talk about what Bubba accomplished a couple years ago. I think it's going to be interesting to see who really has race winning speed versus who's going to try and maximize their day points-wise. Kind of what I talked about earlier. It's not a track where you're going to have to do a bunch of strategy per se. You're not going to have to worry about like a fuel mileage situation the way we've seen at the super speedways. But at the same, and we don't think tire wear is going to be some major factor because it really hasn't been all that much in the past there. But at the same time, we've seen some surprise winners at Kansas. We've seen some things happen. So I wonder if it's one of those things where, does somebody who really needs this win badly at the bottom of the point standings, do they jump up and rise to the occasion? Or do we kind of have somebody who's already in a good position just secure their spot and, go ahead and add another tally to their win total? I'm tempted. I was really tempted to pick Bubba Wallace to win this race. Ultimately, I'm not going to, but I do think Bubba's going to give you a good showing. I think Christopher Bell's on a mission right now, man. I feel like there were so many lulls in his season, and yet here he is. He's back in the playoffs again. He's feeling a little bit of that pressure, but I also think he's feeling that momentum that the 20 teams just had at this time of the year. Gibbs has been a little bit up and down, right? They had that great round in the last round of the playoffs. Now they're trying to kind of find their speed again. You had the Denny Hamlin, Ty Gibbs weird run-in, by the way. It was probably a weird couple days over at Gibbs based on those two getting it sorted out. Give me Christopher Bell to bounce back, get the win for Gibbs Racing, and to kind of, solidify his spot in the round of 8 and keep this thing rolling. But Kansas should be a lot of fun, man. It's been one of the best mile and a halves, obviously. A lot of action there, and I hope it's really, really good racing on Sunday. We will be back next week. 4-tire change rolls on. The NASCAR Cup Series playoffs, man, they're not going anywhere, and neither are we. Go ahead, like, comment, subscribe, and we will see you next week.